Okay, welcome everyone to this evening's session where we're talking about systems innovation methods. My name is Joss Goldster. I'm with the SI London, and along with my co-hosts, you can see them here, Sujit and Manali. We're going to be facilitating the presentation, the discussion, the workshop this evening. I'll take a quick overview to what we're going to cover now in 1 second. I'll just say today's session is going to last 1 hour. We are recording it for those who can't join. And if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to post in the chat. We hope to have a bit of a conversation about these different approaches and get your ideas on them as we go along. So we'll pause for that intermittently. Just to take a quick overview to what we're going to be covering this evening. The idea is for people to get a sense of the different approaches that different organizations use when it comes to actually trying to do systems change and the systems innovation. So we'll be looking at a number of large organizations this evening and their methods. We'll take a quick view of some examples of what they've done. A little disclaimer, I'm not an expert in all of these organizations and all of their projects and all of their approaches, so I can't know everything in that respect. We thought about bringing them on, but it would have got a little bit chaotic having everyone present their approach, so we think this is best just doing it as a presentation like this. We'll kind of briefly, we'll look mainly at their method and kind of skim over maybe 1 or 2 examples of the work they've done in that respect. Okay, so before we get started, let's just step back and take a look at what we're going to do today in our 1 hour together. Just quickly, we're going to say a few words about what systems innovation is, in case you're not familiar with that, and then we're going to jump into 5 examples here. We'll just walk through, you know, who is the organization, what do they do generally, we'll look at their method, and then we'll briefly look at some example of what they do. That's for 4 organizations there. Finally, we'll look at our approach to systems innovation. We have a method, a toolkit, and so forth. We'll look at that. Sujit is going to host a little discussion down here at the bottom before we end. We'd love to hear from you about, well, it's really helping you think through these different dimensions to what's needed when you go to do systems innovation, and why do we need systems thinking? Why do we need systems mapping? And so forth. That's really there just to help you people exercise your thinking on this. And we'll wrap up then. After each little section here, there's a space for you to post your questions. You can put them into the chat in Zoom, or you can join here on the mirror board. Hopefully, Manali, you're able to share the link so that people can join when they wish. And as we go along, you're welcome to post up your questions in the chat or here on the mirror board, and we'll get to those as we go through each section. Great. So it's great to have you joining this evening, and let's get started. So firstly, in case you're not familiar, I mean, this evening is about methods, so that's what we'll be exploring, but just 60 seconds on what exactly are we talking about when we say systems innovation. If you're very new to this, the term might not be familiar to you, so let's just quickly recap on that. So systems innovation, systems change, are about taking a systemic approach to tackling complex problems. It's recognizing that when you have a systemic complex issue, a simple linear approach to that is not going to be sufficed. So it's starting to ask, how do we actually address the network of factors around that that's holding that, creating that problem, creating the emergence of that issue. And we change the system instead of changing the parts is really what we're trying to do here, because we recognize that this linear approach of changing parts is not sustainable. It may solve the problem for a couple of months or a couple of years, but really there's problems with systems, and we need to think about, we need to learn how to change those systems, and that's what these methods are about, right? Individuals and organizations that have thought great, how do we actually do this? And then it started to try and find tools and so forth to do that. So that's the kind of where the need for systems innovation comes from, this recognition of the systemic nature of some of the challenges we face. It's trying to get away from changes in parts, or innovation in parts, new products, services, and so forth, and move towards a new capacity in us as individual societies and organizations to actually influence and guide and change the systems we form part of. And this is it here in a nutshell. We have innovation in parts down here. It's the usual innovation. We come up with some new idea about how to solve a specific problem, and then we put that into a product or service and take it to market. That doesn't solve the wicked challenges we have out there in the world. If we want to influence and change systems, we need a different kind of innovation, and that's called systems innovation. It's aimed at changing the thinking and the way the system is organized to get very different outcomes. And yeah, that's it there. It's looking at more fundamental issues around the way we frame and think about the systems we form part of, and start to think about them in systems a more systemic way and a more holistic way, and then start to think about how do we organize in new ways to actually collaborate and work together around these challenges. So that was a very, very quick crash course into systems innovation. What we're really here for is talking about approaches to doing that. And here's one. UNDP Accelerator Labs. Maybe you've heard of these. UNDP is the United Nations Development Program. Obviously, it's the largest department in the United Nations, very large organization that does development programs around the world. And it historically, and still to a large extent, takes a very traditional kind of top-down, linear, planned approach to development in the countries it works in. In 2019, they started to try something different. And they started to think about this idea of a network of labs. So in 2019, UNDP built the world's largest and fastest learning network on the challenge of sustainable development goals, recognizing that they weren't necessarily making the progress on these SDGs that they wanted to. They took this lab approach. So we started with 60 lab teams covering 78 countries, and they're now over 90 in 115 countries. And the Accelerator Labs are UNDP's new way of working in development. Together with the core partners, so it's funded and set up by Qatar and Germany, they work together with national governments and global partners to find radical new approaches that fit the complexity of current challenges, development challenges. Being part of a globally integrated network, each lab will draw inspiration from both locals and those identified elsewhere within the network. Working in parallel, labs will benefit from each other in real time, creating a powerful collective learning effort. So this is their locations around the world. Each lab normally has a small core team, full-time employees of just 3 or 4 people, but then tries to develop a community, and it's very much a bottom-up approach, shall we say. I'll just say the links are here. If you want to look into any of these, you'll find it at the beginning of each section. This is the Accelerator Labs there. So you just click on it, and then there's a button up here that is the link to their website. So this is their approach. The UNDP Accelerator Labs learning cycle. So their approach is very much focused on learning by listening to different, listening to people on the ground who are really experiencing the problem, which is one of the problems of the UNDP generally, that they come in with a program in a top-down way, and it doesn't really necessarily respond or learn from what's going on there. So each approach here is trying to, it's coming from a particular organization and addresses particular challenges, should we say. So here, I'd say this is a lot about learning and sense making to learn what's going on in that community and explore, test different things and build a portfolio of initiatives with the local government and the local community. So it starts here with sense making. Sense is about understanding what are emerging challenges and opportunities in the local context and determining where we need to focus our attention. So sense making. Exploring. Exploring is about better understanding the challenges and looking for solutions, particularly by looking at how citizens are already addressing these challenges and opportunities. Testing. Testing is about designing a portfolio of potential solutions to intervene at multiple points in the system, continuously testing them until we're confident they can work. And then growing and scaling it. It's about handing over the portfolio of solutions, advocate for policy change, or spinning solutions off as private ventures. So that's the approach, and as you can see, they have many labs around the world and have tackled many different issues. I just pulled out one here. This is from Pakistan, and this location here where they're trying to tackle the issue of food system and food security and people having access to food in rural Pakistan. And I won't go into all of it. We'll just take a quick look here. Surrounded by the mountains and rivers, the lush and green Kushi Valley, with a population of 15,000, is rich in natural resources and beauty. Due to lack of systemic development in investments, it is still deprived of basic necessities. The UNDP Pakistan Accelerator Lab is focusing on food systems for 7 remote and vulnerable villages who are isolated in this vast area due to limited access to roads, connectivity, information, and resources. So these are the different activities that they did. With the help of this foundation, 200 plus in-person interviews were conducted prior to the pandemic. Once the pandemic, they went digital. Over 500 people were reached in this way for deeper ethnographic inquiry and follow-up interviews. Enabled this level of connectivity, the lab used interactive voice response, text messages, call center to be able to talk to people locally. So this is the first part about sensing and listening to the system and what's going on there. Through the lab's listening and mapping work and the digital listening analysis done with tools such as natural language processing, several thematic areas emerged. What the lab learned whilst hearing stories and mapping inhabitants day to day was most of their routine geographical locations and even persona revolved around food. Food economy can be an anchor used to respond to other problem areas, such as women's health and the effects of climate change in the valley, through a strategic and systemic portfolio of initiatives. The lab's goal is to socio-economically empower the people of Kushi Valley through the food economy. Finally, they put together a little portfolio of initiatives. 3 areas of opportunity to improve food security quickly arose from this work: the abundance of apricots, herbal tea processing, and the possibilities for tunnel farming, growing non-seasonal plants and crops in a controlled environment through hybrid seeds. The lab is helping to build prototypes for the community to derive sustainable products such as apricot oil and to market and sell herbal teas. So that's a little example of UNDP Accelerator Labs and their approach. It's probably, for me, what's the most interesting is simply the scale of their network kind of globally. And it's really kind of a learning engine for UNDP and for those national governments. In a certain way, they don't actually implement these things. It's more the governments and the broader UNDP system that does that. What is interesting about this is this huge network they have around the world and the kind of learnings that they manage to capture and share. So happy to pause there. That was just one example, and talk about any questions you may have.
Yeah, I could. This one question regarding, just a more general question. Like at any stage, do they try to understand the local context when trying to understand the greater system?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a number of these labs in actually in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkey, and so forth. They're normally composed of people from that location, so they do have a good grounding in the location. And as they say, it's all about kind of listening to the system and trying to learn from it. Yeah, I think we'd need them here, right, to fully answer a lot of these questions. But yeah, should we stay going? Any others? There's some on the board here.
Yeah. I've been there in that valley. It is quite some time ago. They already did what you described. They had apricots, they had tea and all kinds of stuff, and they were trading that and living from it. So this was 25 years ago. I'm wondering, who are the people who have systemically learned about the self-sustaining community of the Hush Valley people? Is it the Hush Valley people themselves, or is it the authorities who just don't understand what's going on there?
Yeah, very good question. Very good question. Yeah.
Who knows the answer?
And that's part of the problem they're trying to solve, right? So I'm not saying these are, very good examples of systems change. We're just trying to illustrate, what these organizations are doing. But I would agree with you that that's a good question. Did these people themselves actually learn about the system they form part of, and were they enabled to change that system and so on? Or was it more just a learning exercise for UNDP and the national government? That's a good question. Yeah.
It might be very valuable also, of course, but I'm wondering, who is the systemic learner here?
Yep. Any others?
Yeah, there was one which says like, how effective are the cross-lab learning?
Yeah, another good question. So I did watch a presentation of theirs, and what they actually do is they use WhatsApp a lot for the communications internal, and they actually do analytics on the WhatsApp to capture data about what's going on across the different labs and which ones are active and which challenges they're facing and so forth. So I think they've been somewhat effective in that. That is kind of the challenge of a decentralized network, right? How do you actually capture all the learning and share it across the network? That's a big challenge we face at Systems Innovation with all our hubs also. So it's not an easy one. Again, we'll talk to them. Yeah.
Okay, I can probably take one question. Petro has his hand raised.
Yeah, hi. I think a part of the problem is the going from the level of laboratory exploration to the implementation in large scale and enters the realm of politics and the local politics in the countries, and also the flow of profit, and which is affecting a lot of these people too, and not just in Pakistan, but everywhere. So I think that what we find is that there is a blockage of further steps more on a political level than it should be.
Totally. I mean, I was talking to a gentleman who ran one of these labs just 3 months ago at one of our meetups, a gentleman from Argentina, who was part of one of these labs, and he made that exact point, that ultimately kind of what they're doing is feeding information back to the national government, which kind of has blockages there. So yes, there are many failures. There are many failures with all of these approaches, and that's part of what I should say up front. None of us are good at doing systems innovation. We're all learning about this stuff. So I think it's good to take the interesting points from each case study and learn from those. because I think each one has something interesting, but all of them are flawed and failed at the end of the day, right? We wouldn't live in a world with all these wicked problems if we were so good at this stuff, right? So we're learning. Okay, and actually this is a good one to speak to that. So let's stay going. This is the European Union's primary innovation ecosystem for tackling climate change across the European Union, and they've now become increasingly global. They have locations in California, in China, and Australia, and so forth. Some of you will know of Climate-KIC. They're probably the best example of systems innovation at a large scale. They are quite explicit that they're using a systems innovation approach. You'll find the link there if you're not familiar with Climate-KIC. So let's take a look at them. So this is part of the European Institute of Technology. We set up Climate-KIC. These are knowledge and innovation communities. And this one particularly is there to tackle the transition to zero carbon economy and resilient societies, climate resilient societies. Yeah, we believe that a decarbonized sustainable economy is not only necessary to prevent catastrophic climate change, but prevent a wealth of opportunity for business. Maybe I'll stay going for the sake of time. You can see there are large network, actually almost 450 organizations part of this innovation ecosystem, and they're major organizations, cities and regions and universities and so forth, NGOs. So they have an unrivaled breadth of knowledge and experience. Climate-KIC capitalizes and supports innovation for climate action, but it is our community members who make innovation happen. Yeah, so they purposefully took a different approach. So up until 5 years ago, they were taking a pretty traditional approach because they came out of European Institute of Technology. They were quite technology driven. They were quite traditional innovation. About 5 years ago or so, they recognized that wasn't working. They drafted a paper which made it explicit that they wanted to take a systems innovation approach, and they've been doing that now. Since then, they've set up a number of hubs around Europe, and they have been implementing a number of projects. We'll take a look at one of those in a minute, but this is their method. Intent, framing, portfolio, intelligence. So agree intent with challenge owners. So yeah, they're often working, as they say here, with city mayors, regional leaders, government ministries, so on and so forth. And they have to make clear the intention of what they're doing with those stakeholders. To understand their unique problem space, identify current commitments, and secure clear intention for transformational change is what they're starting with. Secondly, they're trying to identify the intervention points. We map the system that need to change, and map the systems that need to change, and identify where and how innovation can play a role in catalyzing change dynamics. We start to design simultaneous innovation positions that can contribute to systems-wide change. So that's kind of looking for the leverage point, should we say. Orchestrating a portfolio. For each challenge, we build and manage a portfolio of 30 to 100 connected innovations, designed to address leverage points identified in the earlier stage. These may combine behavioral, technological, citizen engagement, policy, education, other levers of change. So that's the portfolio, which we saw with UNDP. Finally, the intelligence and sense making and feedback loops. We generate actionable intelligence to accelerate the learning about how to achieve transformation at scale. Feedback loops inform policy making and dynamic management of the innovation portfolio. So I'd say these guys are the most sophisticated at this sort of stuff. Yeah, they're probably more advanced in their thinking than UNDP, if you ask me. But let's take a little look at one example here. This is the Polish city, an interesting case study. We actually did an interview with a lady who's leading this project with Climate-KIC. It's in Poland, and they tried to make transition. Poland is obviously very dependent on coal in some regions, and they're trying to make this transition to a low carbon economy in that region. Cities such as Leuven, Madrid, Amsterdam, Milan, and Edinburgh are part of EIT's Climate-KIC Healthy Clean Cities Deep Demonstration, a program that helps cities innovate on mobility, waste, energy, health, built environment, and so on. The program can be replicated for individual cities to suit local challenges and needs. So they go to these different cities and different regions, and they call it systems innovation as a service. They help them do systems innovation. Here in the context of Rybnik, they're trying to move away from the coal economy. So the Rybnik 360 project is a part of the Just Transition Deep Demonstration Program, where EIT Climate-KIC, together with partners from the European countries, facilitated the transition of European regions that still rely on economies that are incompatible with tackling climate change. The program recognized that people and economies engaged in these sectors are highly vulnerable during the transition to a decarbonized future, and it will demonstrate that just transformations are possible. So Rybnik is situated in the heart of Silesia in Poland, the largest coal producing region in the European Union. The city faced the joint challenges of the energy transition, enormous air pollution, and many residents understand that the transition is necessary and urgent, but a key consideration, as you'd imagine, was employment in these areas. So we're actually going to watch a video. It's a nice little video that gives an overview to what's going on here. It's just about 2-3 minutes long. If it'll play for me.
W Rybniku rozpoczęliśmy proces sprawiedliwej transformacji miasta. Opieramy się o specjalną metodologię EIT Climate-KIC zwaną Deep Demonstration.
To jest bardzo istotne dla miasta Rybnika, dlatego że w ten sposób możemy czerpać inspiracje z innych miast i regionów zarówno Europy, jak i świata. Innowacyjność polega na tym, że troszeczkę tutaj odwracamy rolę. Władze miasta tak naprawdę są nastawione na słuchanie mieszkańców, czyli nie ma tutaj takiego procesu, w którym narzucają pewną perspektywę, ale raczej starają się dowiedzieć od mieszkańców i innych interesariuszy miasta, w jakim kierunku miasto powinno podążać, jeżeli chodzi o rozwój.
To jest okazja do tego, żeby się przyjrzeć tym procesom, do tego, żeby je zbadać i żeby podejmować decyzje na podstawie danych, a nie na podstawie tego, co nam się wydaje.
Projekt Rybnik 360 traktuję jako bardzo dobrą szansę na przedstawienie swojego punktu widzenia na temat tego, jak żyje się w mieście, na opowiedzenie o tym, co jest problemem, a co jest dobre, na przedstawienie swoich pomysłów na to, jak można by poprawić jakość życia w Rybniku.
Podoba mi się to, że wysłuchano szerokiego grona mieszkańców, od najmłodszych po seniorów. Każdy z nich miał okazję do tego, żeby przedstawić swój punkt widzenia.
Dla mnie najważniejszym chyba aspektem w tym projekcie jest jakość powietrza. Jest to coś, co dotyczy każdego z nas.
W ramach projektu Rybnik 360 zdefiniowaliśmy 4 obszary tematyczne, które stanowią właśnie wyzwania. To jest jakość powietrza, jakość życia, przyszłość pracy i przyszłość górnictwa.
Jedną z rzeczy, która najbardziej niepokoi Rybniczan, jest przyszłość miejsc pracy. Rybnik 360 to jest projekt, który dotyczy transformacji górniczej, energetycznej i dotyczy wytyczenia miastu nowej przyszłości, nowego pomysłu na Rybnik, na to, jak on będzie wyglądał w przyszłości, w następnych latach.
Wspólnie tworzymy siatkę działań, która stanowi taką miejską akupunkturę, która zdecydowanie dużo bardziej przełoży się na rzeczywistość, na przyszłość miasta, niż takie działania przypadkowe, na chybił trafił, niezorganizowane i niepowiązane ze sobą.
Projekt, który daje miastu szansę.
Rybnik jest w tej chwili jednym z najambitniejszych miast w Europie podejmując wyzwanie sprawiedliwej transformacji i opierając swoje podejście o innowacje systemowe i o szeroką współpracę z mieszkańcami i interesariuszami miasta.
Rybnik 360 to szansa na rozwój miasta.
To innowacje systemowe.
To oddolne zmiany.
To czyste powietrze.
Rybnik 360 to dobrobyt mieszkańców.
Great. Hopefully that gave you a sense of what we're talking about. Here, when we say systems innovation, those kinds of transformations to whole societies and economies like that. Yeah, so any questions on this one? Anything you want to discuss?
Probably. So one of them asked that how do they identify and address unintended outcomes?
Yeah, so that would be the part of the kind of systems mapping, systems thinking, trying to look more expansively at the broader system and understand the effects of your interventions. I think that's the best we can do, really. Try to map those out and represent them and be conscious of them. And also, I guess, get that feedback loop in terms of learning and the effects of what we're doing. Yeah.
Okay. And another one is, on what scales do they map systems, and do the different systems interrelate?
Well, they certainly do, don't they, in the real world? And you're going to get unintended consequences if you aren't thinking about. But again, you do your best, right? Everything's interconnected, but our brains can only deal with so much complexity. And policymakers can only deal with so much complexity at the end of the day. If you're kind of presenting them something that's way too complex, they're not going to be able to do anything with it. So I'd say you do your best is really the answer there, I'd say.
We have one hand raised. Probably could take that another one later.
Okay. I was wondering, I'm from the Netherlands, we have a strong local democracy. How would it work? Since democracy in our cities and towns is aiming for such collaboration being possible, but if there is some method to it, probably democracy would stand up against it. Because democracy is not about any method. So I was wondering, I saw Amsterdam, but is there anything to say about that? The match between local democracy and such a method of systems innovation.
Yeah. I was giving a presentation for the OECD a short while back, and the lady was from Switzerland, and she asked the exact same question. We have all these cantons here in Switzerland and all their own little political systems. How can we get any of this stuff done? I think the answer is that it has to be kind of bottom up, doesn't it? It has to top down. Something top down is not going to work in that situation. It has to be bottom up. I was just in a meeting with our Amsterdam hub about an hour ago, right? And it's we have Jan here, right? She's part of our Amsterdam hub, and they're doing very well. The Netherlands is very receptive to this, actually, at least the ideas and so forth. So I don't think it's impossible. You just need to think about the right level to do things, right? Obviously, it's not going to work at a very kind of Chinese level of top-down kind of implementation if you're in a place like Switzerland or the Netherlands. You just need to address it on the right level, I think. But yeah, a consideration for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
My question is really, and they say they really engage the citizens and residents and every single person in the city in this kind of innovation process. And I'm wondering how, beyond the type of crowdsourcing, innovation crowdsourcing campaign, a lot of cities has experimented. How do they actually engage community? In a way that the community feel the ownership, not just individual who has brilliant ideas. And I actually don't really believe in that. But rather a community who are really built around certain ideas and take ownership of the idea and develop ideas supported by the government. So I'm just curious how they actually do that.
I'm curious about that too, and I question whether they do. Actually, I go to a forum, a meeting with EIT Climate-KIC in a month in Paris to help them think about their next generation of their strategy. And actually, that's part of what I would talk to them about. I'd say, how do you actually get even more local hubs that are really responding to the, because they have hubs around Europe, but they're actually full of professional people who are working right on this. How do you actually get hubs which are really a bit more like our hubs, should we say, which are really kind of community driven. So they do a great job of activating community and this stuff, but whether that really feeds into the kind of, I think you often get that mismatch between the bigger institutional stuff that they have the capacity to work on and the kind of ground community level sort of stuff. The community stuff doesn't actually properly feed into that larger kind of institutional changes and so forth. So that stuff's challenging. I'd say again with the World Economic Forum and their Global Shapers community network is another example of that kind of challenge. But yeah, these are some of the issues we face. There's one last quick question before we move on, Pedro.
Okay, thanks. Trying to get my microphone on. I think that one of the aspects that we are fighting without is the access to essentially advertising. We have to make people talk about the issues. And we know that people talk about the issues that are presented to them in newspapers, in ads, and this and so on. They become sort of the topic of discussion. You go to the bar, you go to the cafe, you go to your friends, and you're talking about those things. System change and all this sort of things, I don't think it has made it to the cafe yet. That's we need to go.
That's what our hubs are all about, creating those spaces, creating new spaces in society. That's when things change, isn't it? When you create new spaces for people to have new conversations that need to happen, right? That happened when we moved into the modern era, right? We used to be ruled by kings and queens. There was no space to talk about democracy or any of this. Then we had those cafes in France and the Netherlands and so forth, where people could get together and share new ideas and talk about this stuff, and new things bubbled up. And that's what we need, didn't it? Spaces like that to talk about this.
In the marketplace, when they go to the market.
The forum, right? In Greek, right? In Greece, the ancient forum. Great, yeah. Okay, let's stay going. So the next time we're talking about the Omidyar group, which is a foundation, philanthropy in the United States of America. And they have the systems practice. Rob Rixigliana is kind of the driving force behind this. He teaches this course, systems practice. So you can find the link there and learn all about that. He produced, we did an interview with him a couple of last year, I think. He's worked on a lot of interesting projects, particularly in the United States, using this approach. So here it is. This is a really good, this one here. Systems practice has great videos, great resources, and kind of walks you through everything. So would recommend that. You should find the link there. So here it is. They kind of all seem to have like 4 or 5 stages. This has got a kind of a pre-stage. So the pre-stage is forming a team, acquiring systems practice fundamentals, and planning for the journey ahead. So it's just kind of setting your team up and getting started. And then these are the four stages they talk about. So starting with gaining clarity. We just step back here. So it's gaining clarity, finding leverage points. We saw that one before. Acting strategically, and then learning and adapting. We saw that in the UNDP one. So here, gaining clarity. Developing a deep understanding of the system and then building a map that captures the key forces and patterns driving the system's behavior. So they have a number of stages. They kind of break this down into a few different stages. You can see them there, but here, in order to have an impact on a complex system, we need to understand our reality. Understanding and mapping the system is a powerful tool in our practice for visualizing the current system in a way that helps us to identify opportunities for having the most impact. In this phase, we'll explore the forces that affect your system, see how they relate to each other, Through a robust process, you'll be able to uncover and elevate the deep structure that drives the behavior of the system. At the end of the section, you will have a working systems map and narratives that you can test and iterate with stakeholders and experts before you move to creating a strategy. So that's gaining clarity. It's a lot of systems analysis, systems mapping. The second one's around leverage points, exploring the most promising opportunities for engaging the system in ways that could help push it forward, push it towards greater health. So this is about where are we going to intervene. All of the time your team spent on rigorously building systems map has prepared you to find leverage in the system, or places that, if engaged, have the greatest potential to create positive change with comparatively modest effort. This portion of the system's practice journey focuses on clearly and concisely stating what is disliked about the current state of the system, and identifying the most promising ways to potentially shift the system to a healthier state. You'll then work together to stress test the logic of your hypotheses and evaluate how well each approach may fit with your organization. This will provide the foundations of being able to move forwards and act strategically within the system. So they have a number of different, kind of break it down into a few different activities there. So finding leverage, and then acting strategically, designing and implementing any approach. Designing and implementing an approach that exploits opportunities for leverage to make sustainable social change. Now that you have narrowed down a set of leverage points, leverage areas, you need to think about how you might develop a coherent systems change strategy that maximizes your potential to make an impact on the system. In this step, you will explore how different leverage areas may impact or support each other, develop your systems change strategy, and enhance it with a compelling narrative and visualization. And then the final stage is around adapting and learning, continuously sensing and learning from the system and adapting accordingly. Yeah, so I'll just say, I don't think any of these would have, they're all non-linear, and we can see that, right? So it's never going to be step 1, step 2, step 3. It's always going to be iterative. I'm sure all of the people who produce these frameworks would say that. So let's not be misguided by the 1, 2, 3 steps. It's never like that. It's always an iterative process. That's the Omidyar group. There's an example here of, yeah, we won't go into it for the sake of time, but it's about how this lady used street football as a way to bring different communities together in Latin America and overcome differences and diversity and conflicts through bringing people together around football. Yeah, let's stay going so we get to the rest of them. Yeah, so one quick question there, or should I stay going?
No question yet.
There's one from, yeah, Alan. No, is that a question?
No. No, I think in the chat we have more.
Okay.
Suggested work.
Okay, let's stay going. So this here is Good of Systems Change by Forum for the Future. They're probably the most advanced in their understanding of systems change because that's what they do. They run programs and teach people about this stuff. You'll find the link there. These are partners of ours here in London and good friends, and they don't necessarily have an approach or a process like the others. It's more a set of capabilities is how they talk about it. You need to go about this. So that's maybe a more productive way of thinking about this, that these are just different dimensions that you need to be thinking about and working on instead of like a 1, 2, 3 step program. Anyway, this is what they have. Strategic diagnosis, strategic design, and then I think it goes down here, innovate for impact, and then collaborate and engage, leadership and learning. So it's not necessarily that they have numbers here, it's not really a process, it's really like you need these capabilities You need to be able to diagnose the system, which is what the others were talking about when they said systems mapping and so forth. The Omidyar group there was talking about strategy. Collaboration is key to all of this, bring people together, innovate for impact, and they're talking about leadership here. So very, very quickly, they start here, systemic diagnosis, diagnose complex sustainable challenges using a systems approach. Yeah, let's not go into all of this because we have more to cover, but systemic design systems change strategies and interventions. Let's diagnose and then develop strategies. Number 3, innovate for impact, develop and realize innovative solutions that seek to create scalable and systemic impact. Yeah, so this board will be here afterwards. You're welcome to read over all of this stuff. Collaborate and engage, seek, initiate, build and facilitate partnerships and collaborate for change. And then leadership and learning and lead into complex and uncertain futures. So I guess that's quite similar to the others that have the kind of initiative, feedback, learning aspect to it. Okay, so that's forum for the future and the School of Systems Change. I'd recommend you check them out if you're very interested in learning about this stuff. So down here, we have our approach that I worked on and put together. Our set of guides and also our set of tools are combined into a toolkit, which has a method. You can find that both of these explain it up here. This is what it looks like. It's quite a bit of research I did, looking at all the other kind of methods and approaches and thinking about it myself, and then also more recently trying to apply it and think about what works in practice, what do you really need in practice. So we'll look at a bit of an example now in a second, but this is the general aspects that I think are kind of necessary for doing this kind of transformational innovation. And it starts with systems thinking, shifting our thinking from ecosystem to ecosystem. So essentially changing paradigm, thinking systemically about what we're doing, looking at the whole system instead of trying to find solutions in some individual part, and getting away from our kind of innate linear thinking that's very much built into our way of looking at the world, which leads us to a certain set of solutions that often just perpetuate the problem. So that's systems thinking and systems mapping. You know, we've kind of seen that everywhere here. It's going to be in basically every systems change approach. You're going to have to understand the system before you make some kind of intervention. So yeah, a food system, right? You're going to have to map out who are the actors, what are the different players, should we say, different dimensions of the system, how are they interrelated, so on and so forth. And systems change, which is thinking about the transition and, as the other one said, the leverage points. What are the new innovations in this system that need to be brought, that need to be developed, nurtured, and connected and nourished into building the next generation of this system? So in basically every systems change method, you'll see at least these two things, mapping and leverage points, which is, this one here is understanding the system, and this one here is then, where are we going to intervene? Because you're always going to have that question. You're always going to have the question of, what does this system look like? And you're always going to have the question, where are we going to intervene in that system? Because we can't do everything. So you saw that in the other ones, right? The mapping, leverage points, and then this one here, which is about collaboration, bringing those actors together to work together towards developing, nurturing, connecting, and building this next generation system, which you saw in Forum for the Future there around collaboration. You'll hear that a lot when people talk about system change. How do we bring people together, get them working together and collaborating to develop a new system? As we talk about systems building or ecosystem building, is what we're talking about there. So those are kind of the main capacities, main dimensions to doing systems innovation initiative or project, whatever you want to call it. And again, it is very much iterative. Start with something small, you iterate through it, and then something larger and stay iterating. You'll find the toolkit there on the website. There's all these tools you would use at those different stages, right? To start thinking systemically, you could use the iceberg model. You could use this ecosystem thinking canvas. For your mapping, you have stakeholder mapping, actor mapping, so on and so forth. Down here, there are different models to think about transition processes. And over here, for thinking about how to build an ecosystem, an innovation ecosystem, and bring people together. Yes, should we take a question, Benali?
Yeah, we could start with the one with a hand raised. If you want to switch on your mic first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for taking my question. So I'm really interested at the intersection of kind of using these systems innovation methods and how they may look in democratic processes, and more specifically looking at citizens' assemblies or any type of deliberative processes. From my understanding, I think there's a great space where we can start democratizing systems innovation in the map and kind of using these methods within an assembly. But my question is that usually to create a map, you definitely need specific stakeholders in a room that may have like specific expertise or closeness to a problem. And I guess I'm wondering, has there been any thought within the systems mapping world, systems innovation world, of how this may look in an assembly type of model where they're meeting perhaps 6, 7, 8 times on weekends? Is there feasibility of this? I'm just curious about what the world is speaking about right now, because part of my thesis was focused on this area of inquiry.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting, important context. And I'd say it's quite a conducive context, isn't it? Because those people are coming together. That's kind of the nature of what you're doing, the citizens' assembly, bringing people together. I'm not aware of any work in that particular area. Maybe a Google search is the best answer to that one. Yeah, you can also take a look at the tools on our website around mapping and so forth. Maybe that will help. Okay, so just quickly, examples of kind of how we applied that before we'll take a few minutes to have you guys think about this stuff in that little workshop. So we are using this in a couple of projects. We have a climate resilient lab that we're running, and you can see the different dimensions here, right? The first board here is about that systems thinking, trying to change the paradigm from thinking about climate change and challenge climate change from this egocentric, symptomatic, reductionist perspective to an ecosystem systems thinking perspective, and changing the way of thinking about it there. The second stage, as mentioned, the mapping. This is a co-creation we did, mapping out the different factors affecting a climate resilient city, which is what the lab is focused on. Down here is down here is the third one around the leverage points, which is what came out of this, the green ones, the places, changes that need to come about, places we may intervene, and we have them down here, the leverage points that we're currently researching. And over here is the kind of ecosystem we want to try and bring together here in the UK, different people working on this, different organizations, and stay iterating through that to be a platform. The lab will essentially be a platform to help them co-learn and co-create responses to the climate challenges here in London, the UK. As one example, we're also working on this larger project, an innovation ecosystem in Africa, BFA Global, British Foreign Aid. This is its mission to launch 100 ventures by 2026 to bolster the climate resilience of vulnerable communities and the planet, leveraging fintech and other enabling technologies, particularly in coastal communities in Africa. We used this approach to kind of design that platform that they're trying to build, somewhat similar to what you see here. Okay, so just a few minutes left. I'm going to hand it over to Sujit, who's going to help you think about this stuff for yourself, these different dimensions.
Thank you so much, Joss. I think that was really nice, just sort of understanding the various methods that are being adopted by such innovative organizations who've adopted systems innovation approach, right? Just as next steps, what we thought is it would be nice if everybody on the call could sort of head over to this Miro board. I can share the link again on the chat in case you're not on it, right? And what we would like you to do is essentially just share your thoughts, right, on what do you think. So Josh briefly touched upon the 4 dimensions of the systems innovation approach, right? So you could maybe sort of put on your thoughts, your ideas with regards to each of these dimensions that he mentioned, right? And we completely understand that you might be at a different spectrum in terms of your knowledge or your expertise with regards to systems thinking, but feel free to just leave your comments here, yeah? We can start with the first dimension with the systems thinking. And just in terms of lieu of time, since we just have a couple of minutes to go, we can you can do it as per your liking. You can pick up any dimension and do it, or you can also focus on all of those. I think Josh, you're on mute. Are you saying something?
Sorry, excuse me. So I think that a good question to ask yourself here is maybe the question of why are we doing this? This aspect in the context of the broader change we're trying to bring about. What's important about the systems thinking? And what would happen if we didn't do this part? Or what would happen if we didn't do the systems mapping? And why is that important? And so forth. Yeah. Do you want to share your screen, Sujit, or should I stick on that?
Yeah, I can share. Nice. We have a lot of people commenting on the systems thinking and systems mapping dimensions. Someone says needs improvements. A little bit too theoretic.
This one always makes me think about that Einstein, the same old thinking, same old result. That kind of answers this question for me. If we're not thinking in systems, we're probably going to get the same results.
Yeah. I believe there is a lot of unthinking. Systems feeling needs to be done before we can truly think in system. So true.
So another quote the other day was actually, you got to realize that you're blind before you can start to see. And I've been kind of thinking about that in the context of this systems thinking stuff. It's I always teach it by talking about reductionism first and trying to help people see that before they could maybe contrast it with something else and start to really understand that.
Someone says, I think to meet complexity with complexity, it is important to understand how systems work. I think there's a question there for you, Josh. Should there be a fifth dimension around systems culture to get into unpacking power dynamics, equity practices, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we could put that into that section around systems thinking. I mean, including culture, beliefs, norms, and so forth. But yeah, power dynamics are an important part. I mean, when we talk about power in terms of institutions and so forth, I more kind of put that down in the systems change part, where we're thinking about the transition from the old system to the new system, how the existing powers may kind of inhibit it, and what's that relationship? How do you deal with that kind of imbalance of power and so forth? Might put that down there.
Nice. Part of the challenge is to explain stakeholders this complexity with an accessible language and examples. Yeah, I think that's why we exist. We're just trying to endorse and evangelize this to get more people on board. People who start thinking in systems. Let's move over to the systems mapping dimension. What are some of the available systems mapping tools out there?
Yeah, if you put in the search bar on our website, mapping systems mapping or systems mapping tools, Hannah actually did a review of different tools and wrote up a list there, so you'll find them there.
Perfect. Hopefully that answers your question. With regards to tool, I can't find effective tools. As Josh mentioned, please just go onto the website and you shall be able to look up an article which will tell you the various tools that are out there. What does a good map look like? I think again on our website we've got loads of examples of systems maps, right? The more you interact with the community, you will be given access to more maps, and I think also become part of labs that you might be interested in. Yeah. How do you know when you have reached enough mapping? Interesting question. Curious of ways to have great representation within the system to create systems map. Are there ways to enable large groups to build these ways that distribute power? Think crowdsourced system mapping.
Okay, maybe we should wrap up. I think our time is up. We try to stay on time. Yeah, just to look at, sorry, down here, just keep posted about what's coming up. We have a learning session next week, Introduction to Systems Innovation. If you're new to all of this, you'll find the link up here. You can join for that. We actually have a learning lab. Our first one's starting in October, but that's up already. The second one starting in November is an opportunity to actually get a simulation of some kind taking this toolkit and this process and working through a challenge with a group of peers, cohort-based learning over the course of 6 weeks. It's a group of about 15 to 20 people, so that's available there if you're interested in that. And here's where you can find us. You can join our hub. This is the London hub, LinkedIn. We'll have a recording of this session here on our YouTube. You can find us on Twitter also. We'd love some feedback. How did you find this session here today? Let me lock this down before you run away with it. The feedback's very useful. It does inform our future sessions, so would appreciate that. Just grab a sticky left to right as to how effective it was, and if you want to put up any comments, that would be great as feedback. But thank you all for joining. It was a great, interesting session, I think, and I hope it was useful for you. The mirror board is here, so you can stay digging into things, going more in depth on those examples, and you'll find the links at the beginning here, as mentioned. We'll wrap up now. Thank you all for joining. See you at a future event.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Bye-bye.